Good afternoon, and thanks for clicking on to the Thursday, the 18th of July edition of Vogan's European Outlook. Yes, we are going to be talking about the early thoughts on winter 2024-25. But before we continue with the video, hit that like button, share with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel. It would be greatly appreciated. You're saying to yourself, Mark, why the heck are you looking at winter? It's only the 18th of July. Well, here at Mark Vogan Weather and across many channels, including Gav's Weather Vids, and others are going to be continuing to now start to look at the early seedlings to what may lie ahead further down the road here. Weather never stops, forecasting never stops, and it's never too early to talk about winter, is it? So let's get right into it here. This is a very quick and dirty look at the initials. So obviously between now and late autumn, when we have eventually released the winter forecast, this is the time to kind of monitor things and look at some of the models, look at the current situation going on, what's the type of summer that we've seen so far, etc., etc. And there is a few quite interesting things going on that I wanted to share with you in today's video. So, like I said, the title, as it says, Early Thoughts on Winter 2024-25, isn't hard to believe that we're on that this winter so far. You know, I can remember back to the late 90s, early 2000s, even before that. It's just mind-boggling to think that we're now pushing, 25 years into the new century. It's frightening, isn't it? Seems to be the time just flies on and speeds up as you get older. But anyway, developing La Niña. Feels as if we're talking about developing La Niña for quite some time now, and the reason why is because it's pretty slow. It's taken its good old time to develop. It looked as if it was going to kick in, several weeks ago. Then it kind of stalled, especially Niña Region 3.4, which is a little bit further out in the Pacific compared to Niña Region 1.2, which is closer to South America. But we've got a lot of cold waters deep below the surface here, and there is a lot of model guidance suggesting that we're going to increase the easterly trade winds over the eastern equatorial Pacific, and that should allow some of that cold water from below the surface to rise up to the surface and cooling, particularly further west towards the Niña Region 3.4. But this is an interesting, it's actually a screen capture from a video here that I was watching last night by Matthew Euler, who is of Spot On Weather in the United States. And he was looking at the specific developing La Niñas during the course of July to September and past years. So obviously I want to give the guy credit. I'm not trying to steal any of his work, but he selected these years where La Niña developed, whether it be weak or moderate, during the period between July and September, because we are expecting to see, and NOAA and NASA and other agencies are expecting La Niña to kind of come on further as we move through this time frame here. So he's picked out the years from 1985, 1988, 95, 98, 99, 2000, 07, 2010, 2011, 2016, 2020, 2021, and 2022. These are the years where, in recent times, where we've seen La Niña develop and come on during July and through September. And basically, I've put in these dots here where winters have been kind of notable, or colder than average versus warmer than average. So the purpley dots represent cold winters when you've had a La Niña developing during September, July through September, and you've also had warmer winters. So obviously 98, 99 stands out. We did have some cold spells within that period, obviously. 2007 really stands out, actually. 2006, 7, and 7, 8 were quite warm winters. This is just purely based on developing La Niña. Take all other teleconnections, climate drivers, whatever, out of the equation for now. These are the kind of standouts in terms of warm versus cold. Now, obviously, some notables here. 2010, for example, 2011-12. Now, that was primarily wishy-washy winter in a sense for the UK, with one significant cold spell during that winter. But for Europe, it was a brutally cold winter in 2011, 2012. 2010 started off very cold and then turned warm during January and February, obviously. 2000 was an interesting winter. I always remember that being a cold and snowy one, but mainly for Scotland, actually. Northern Ireland also, it was warmer across England and Wales. We had 2020. Now, obviously, that was actually a reasonably cool winter. 2020 then saw a significant stratospheric warming and then bitterly cold conditions. The coldest temperatures seen in the UK since '95, actually, during that February of 2021. Wanted to get that in there. And obviously, we've had a reasonably warm winter in 2021-22 and 22-23 also. 2021-2022 was marginally milder than average, but we had a cold December back then. Or was it 2022-23? I actually, honestly, for the life of me, get mixed up with years now and what winter was what. I don't know if it's just me. Let me know in the comment section below. Do you get confused as you get into your 40s? I don't know. But anyway, so that is one aspect to consider. So the prospects of a developing La Niña. The cool June, July, obviously question mark over August because we don't know what August is going to bring yet. And I think the tropics really hold the cards with regards to the type of pattern that we'll see during the month of August. But I think it's pretty much anchored in place now. I could be mistaken, but I think July is firmly below average, or at least slightly below average. So that June through July period is going to be cooler than average for the UK. We've obviously discussed that in great detail in recent times. Now, this is an interesting graphic here. A little bit very difficult to see. In fact, I do apologize for that. Let's see if I can blow this up actually just real quick here and see if it shows up any clearer. Because this is actually an article on my website that I'm writing that is not actually published yet. So there you go. You're actually getting to see stuff that hasn't even been published yet. But anyway, so this is the Central England temperature for the summer so far. For the first half of meteorological summer 2024, you have to go back to 2012, the last time it was as cool as it has been so far this year. Then you have to go all the way back to 1991, the last time it compares to this year and 2012. So we're right in there with the second coldest start to a winter in 30 years. That may have zero significance to the upcoming winter, or it could be telling us a story. Because if you look at some of these years, 2002 was a cool first half to winter. 1998, we don't want that. That was obviously a not so cold winter. 1991, an interesting one. We've got a bunch of 1980s, late 70s summers here that were cool. But generally speaking, this summer so far, to me anyway, has a slight resemblance to the early 2000s and 10s. So 2010, 2011, even 2012. Remember what happened in 2012? We had the Beast from the East in 2013. The coldest March in 2013, second coldest on record for the UK. So 2008 was relatively mild, but we had, I believe, if I'm right in saying, a significant period of snow and cold, especially across southern England during early 2009. So 08, 09, we obviously had the brutal winter, especially across mainland Europe in 2011-12. 2012, 2013, we had the very cold back half to winter. So, yeah, this may be interesting to watch as well as we go forward in terms of the type of summer that we're having versus the winter following. So, yeah, let's see what happens. Current and future sea surface temperatures in both the North Pacific and the North Atlantic. Let's zoom back out here so it's a little bit easier to see. So that's another aspect. This is the current sea surface temperatures across the planet. Do I have a better view of that for you to be able to see? So here we go. You can see here very warm waters over the central and western North Atlantic. We've got some warm waters over the North Pacific, but we've got cool to the south of Alaska, cool to the south of Greenland, etc., west of the UK and Ireland as well. There's the La Niña developing. We've got a somewhat neutral Indian Ocean dipole. We'll look at that in just a second as well. But nevertheless, this is the sea surface temperatures seen currently at the moment, and the anomalies at least. This is the CFSV2 for the December through February period coming up. So the upcoming winter season looks like this according to the CFSV2. So they've got the more Madoki style La Niña, where the coldest waters are actually more out towards Niña region 3, 4, and even further west towards the dateline. We've got a very warm North Pacific. We've got a very warm North Atlantic with a ribbon of cool extending out from New England, the Canadian Maritimes, out towards the North Atlantic here. This is the NMME model here, and you can see here. So the Indian Ocean dipole also is generally neutral. We've neither got warmer versus colder on either side of the basin. It's generally quite a uniform. The NMME model here for the December through February period looks like a stronger La Niña for a start. We've got the warm Pacific, the warm Atlantic here. We've got kind of neutral conditions again in terms of the Indian Ocean dipole. So we'll wait and see what happens with regards to this. We'll obviously discuss that a lot further as we go through the weeks and the next few months here. We'll look at this in a good bit more detail. Like I say, this is a kind of quick, dirty look at some of the initials that I would look at with regards to building a forecast. The westerly QBO, that is the mean winds within the stratosphere over the equator, and it's reversed from a fairly strong easterly last winter. Easterly winds within the stratosphere over the equator can lead to a frictional effect on the jet stream and actually weaken it, can force it to become more meridional or wavy, allowing outbreaks of cold into the mid-latitude pattern. Also can allow warmer northwards away from the subtropics towards the pole also. But it generally creates a slowdown in the westerlies. It allows it to become more amplified and wavy. The westerly QBO, however, means that the winds within the stratosphere over the equator are actually blowing in the same direction as what the polar jet stream is doing as well. So that's sometimes westerly QBOs, not always, but sometimes can lead to a stronger polar jet stream within the mid to high latitude pattern. So westerly QBO winters can be either or. A strong westerly QBO sometimes can lead to a stronger polar vortex, stronger jet stream, milder overall winter, but not always the case. Potentially very busy. This is an important one. The potentially very busy tropics within the August through October period. Now, we've seen it last year, in fact, where we had quite a lot of activity during the late summer into the early autumn season. We had a cold start to winter last year, remember, and I want to make mention of the fact that all the way up until the 20th of January last winter, the UK was actually slightly below average. So it's very quick and easy to remember last winter based on the record or near record warm February that was seen. We forget that up until the 20th of January, it was actually a colder than average winter. We had a significant cold spell during mid-January, which is easily forgotten about. We also had a cold December, which is easily forgotten about. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of June, July, August last summer. Because remember, it was a warmer than average summer, but it was skewed by the very warm June. We had a slightly below average July, with an average to slightly below average August. But because June was so warm, the summer overall was warmer than average. So the actual winter and the summer last year, but last summer was one of the best that I've ever produced. But last winter actually wasn't too bad when you consider December and January. It was February that threw everything out the pram, so to speak, for me. So it's always good to remember back to what was said and see what happened. And it's amazing how even just a 4-week period in an overall season can actually kind of almost make you forget what happened before. But the potentially very busy tropics can be one of two things. It can bring on an early winter, it can promote blocking and cold conditions, especially late, like, November, December can be quite a cold period when you've got the right type of tropical activity. So recurving tropical storms or hurricanes within the Atlantic, running up the western side of the Atlantic basin that can promote blocking over the North Atlantic, Greenland, forcing a trough into the UK. Also, it can actually promote heat wave conditions. This is the problem with August. We do not know what's going to happen in the tropics, and until we do, we don't know what's going to happen in the mid latitudes here in Europe as well. Another interesting factor to consider, so the solar maximum, it looks as if, and it's quite widely believed within the scientific community and solar science, that we may have peaked in terms of solar cycle 25. And again, this can be one of two things. It can enhance the jet stream, it can speed the jet stream up. When you've got enhanced solar activity, you tend to find things move along just that wee bit more. When you've got a solar minimum, I believe, to my understanding, it can have weakening and southward displacing effects on the jet stream. So solar maximum is another factor that can be looked at. And what I'm going to try and do in the coming weeks to come is matching up solar maximum years with developing La Niñas and other aspects, and try and join the dots up. That will be interesting to see with regards to that. Southern Hemisphere SSW, they don't happen as much as they do in the Northern Hemisphere, but it looks as if we've got an ongoing sudden stratospheric warming over the Antarctic here. And the reason why I'm throwing this in here is because it has been noted before that there has been some element of correlation. Not an exact science by any stretch here, and this is maybe just kind of scientific speculation as opposed to anything fundamentally proved. But there has been known in the past to have an SSW occur over the southern hemisphere, and the following northern hemispheric winter sees another occurrence taking place here of that. So a sudden stratospheric warming initially taking place during our summer over the Antarctic winter, and then it actually happens over the Arctic region the following winter, 12 months later. So it's going to be interesting to see that taking place. So I've made this little note at the bottom here. Important to note, I believe that the latter half of winter 2023-24 last year, and the warmth was attributed directly to the strengthening El Nino and positive IOD, which peaked during late autumn. So in other words, like I'd already said, we had up until January 20th, the UK and Ireland was in fact experiencing a slightly colder than average winter, likely driven by the MJO, favourable MJO, and the weak polar vortex, which aided a predominantly negative NAO. But like last June, the record warmth, followed by the near average July and August, tipped the warmer than average overall summer balance. The record or near record warm February essentially skewed the December-February period, making the overall season warmer than average. Let's real quick look at another aspect to consider here. This is Colorado State University. This is Phil Klotzbach's 7 analogues for July 2024 Atlantic hurricane season forecast. They are 1886, 1926, 1933, and then it becomes a little bit more important, 95, 05, 2010, and 2020. So the 05-06 winter was warm. So this is based on sea surface temperatures, developing La Niña, etc., etc. But the two standouts for me is 2010, 2020. And this has already been alluded to with regards to the developing La Niña and sea surface temperature profile similarities in both the warm Atlantic and the developing La Niña here. But 2010, 2020 both had significant periods of cold during the following winter. So obviously 2010, 2011, so the December to remember, and 2020 saw the record cold spell during February of 2021, so the back end of winter, the following winter. of 2020 was significant here. And obviously La Niñas can tend to have front-loaded cold spells during a winter season, warmer back halves. I want to very, very quickly also look at the CANSIPS model here for December 2024. You can see here some very prominent region taking place. This is all for fun. Obviously, we know that this is fantasy land. It's only July, etc. But nonetheless, it's interesting to see. December looks like this here with a ridge kind of extending its influence just to the west of the UK and Ireland. You could argue that it has a little bit of a northwesterly component to that, which can be a little bit colder. Then as we look into the month of January 2025, the CANSIPS model has a region over the UK, Ireland, and generally over Europe, and also over the central and eastern United States. That looks like a firmly positive NAO pattern with negative over Greenland and over northern North America. Into February 2025, looks like this here, seen by the Canadian model, and again it's promoting a largely warmer than average signal overall. The NMME model here only gives temperature anomalies here, but this is how the month of December is looking according to this model. Looks as if it's got average conditions over the UK and Ireland and most of Europe here. Southeastern Europe actually colder than average. North America generally warmer than average. The further east over the United States you go. Into the month of January is looking like this here, actually close to average conditions. Quite a lot of cold air coming out of Alaska down into the heart of the United States, slightly warmer than average across the far south. Then into the month of February 2025, according to the NMME model, you can see here that it's slightly warmer than average across the UK, Ireland, and most of Europe here. Finally, looking at the CFSV2, real quick, you can see here what the model is indicating. This is the upper heights, obviously, for December so far, and you can see here that it's actually showing a bit of a negative NAO signal here. So region to the northwest of the UK and Ireland, primarily focused over the North Atlantic, Greenland and Arctic region here. We've got a trough over the eastern United States for December, and you could argue that we may have a cold December seen just very, very quickly looking based on this model. Let's skip on to January. You can see here that we've got a slight negative just to the west of the UK and Ireland. That would likely promote a generally Atlantic-driven January. And then moving on finally to February 2025, you can see here that we've got a generally positive AO and NAO signal. Milder, wetter, and windier would be the theme. So I hope you've enjoyed today's content here. Hit that like button and subscribe if you did. And I'll see you next time with more. We'll look at August in a little bit more detail and the current here and now pattern that's going on. So we'll plenty to look at. I'll get there. Plenty to look at coming up tomorrow. So I hope you can join me for that. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. See you tomorrow with more. Bye for now.